Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our webinar today. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Chad Sublett. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Verve Networks, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Office 365, Best-in-Class Productivity for the Modern SMB. For those of you that aren't familiar with Verve, we are San Joaquin County's largest provider of IT services. We're located right here in downtown Stockton on the corner of San Joaquin and Main. And we serve about 100 different companies located throughout Northern California every single day. Our clients consist of folks like those on the call, small and medium-sized businesses located in our region that have a need for IT consulting or IT services. We've been doing this for about 10 years, and we've worked with all kinds of different clients ranging from schools to credit unions and banks to construction offices and CPAs and attorneys and doctors' offices. So we have a really wide client niche, and we've helped many of those clients make the migration to Office 365 and choose this tooling versus some of the other on-premise solutions. On the call today, we have our CEO, Jeff Gilbert. He's going to be running the webinar. He's going to tell us all about the benefits of Office 365, why it makes sense for some businesses, and in some cases why it may not make sense for businesses. He's also going to give us a brief demonstration of the web portal as well as the administrative control panel. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and let him take control of the screen and go from here. Jeff?
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Hi, everyone. As Chad said, I'm Jeff Gilbert. I'm the CEO of Verve Networks. Verve's been around since 2006, serving small, medium businesses in our area. I've been around in this industry since 1996, it's scary to say, and I have to say that in this 20-year span that I've been doing this, this is really the second time I've been this excited about a technology and about a trend in the industry in that entire time. Back in the day in 1996, it was all about T1s and Windows 95, and the internet was just getting started, and all of us were kind of looking at each other saying, what is this thing? That was a really fun time to be in IT. I was just getting started in my career, and I got to be a part of just a really cool transition in the industry. This is really the same transition that we're seeing right now. We're entering this cloud era. We've clearly been using the internet for a long time now, but what we're seeing is this change in both in the industry, the IT industry, but the business environment as well, in terms of how we engage the cloud, how we use our tools, and how our workspace is changing. So before we get started into what Office 365 is, it's important to talk about what the drivers are for Office 365. So Office 365 is a platform that is changing the way we work. It's because the world itself is working differently. Chad and I do another presentation called The Modern Workforce. And what that's about is the fact that 50%, it's actually 46% of the workforce will be comprised of millennials by the year 2020, which is less than 2 years away. And the millennials are the first generation of digital natives. And what that means is that these folks are people who have grown up with the internet. They've never known life without technology. They have a mobile phone, I think permanently sewed to their hip. They access the internet for everything. They're very fluent. And as a workforce, this is driving certain expectations in the workplace that is similar to what they're used to using in their own personal lives. And that's really about mobility. It's about being able to access all of their data from any device, anywhere. And it's affecting the business environment in a big way. And Office 365 is really a product of that. It's Microsoft's answer to the need to have a very cloudy work environment that is highly mobile, and it can be accessed anytime, anywhere, on any device. So you can see some statistics here. 50% of business email users will primarily rely on a mobile device by 2016, and that's primarily. So all of us use email and such on our phones, but what they're saying is that a mobile device will be the primary device for 50% of business email users, and this is back in 2016. 3.5 million SMBs will use instant collaboration apps. What this is things like text, it's things like Skype, it's things like Slack. These are fundamental parts of the collaboration environment. 2.5 million people will use web conferencing, and 71% of SMBs believe that mobile apps will entirely replace some traditional solutions in the near future, and indeed that's already happening. So Office 365, what is it? The best way to describe Office 365 is that it's a platform. It's clearly a cloud-based service, but it's not just about taking all of the things that were on-premise and moving them up to a data center in the cloud. It's really about, yes, doing that, but taking advantage of that sort of ownership and the location and the integration of all of these services to create this very, very high value service that your end users can consume. It's really greater, it's the sum of the whole being greater than the parts, and what I hope to do is demonstrate a little bit of that today. So at a fundamental level, the first piece of Office 365 is Exchange Online. Most of you probably have used Exchange Server at some point in your career. 90% of the business world uses Exchange. And Exchange is an application. It's software that gets installed on a server somewhere. It's very expensive. It's very complicated to set up. It takes a lot of care and feeding. It can break. And when we need to upgrade Exchange to the next version, it can be traumatic, and there can be significant issues in that process. So the first component here is email, right? It's the part of our life that we probably spend the majority of our time in, unfortunately. It's about working in Outlook and being able to collaborate back and forth. So Exchange Online takes all that, moves it up into the cloud, and as part of the service, every user gets 50 gigs of mailbox storage. And that's just a tremendous amount, and it's not something that you ever have to worry about running out of space. It's all managed for you, and it works very, very well. The second major component of Office 365 is SharePoint. And what SharePoint is for is really the second major part of your workspace that many of us in business use, which are things like shared files. And these are all the files that you may find on your server in a file share. Maybe you have a drive mapped to it, like your Z drive or your X drive, or maybe you got 5 different drives mapped to 5 different shares. But really, they're folders that are stored centrally. Your IT department backs these things up on a regular basis, and there's permissions on the different folders, and certain departments may have access to certain folders. So that process consumes storage on a server. Again, it has to be maintained. It has to be managed, and it's pretty basic. SharePoint is really about taking all of those documents, your Word documents and Excel documents, and taking them off a server and moving them up into the cloud. And what you get with that is a web interface that allows you to access those files from anywhere. But more than that, now that the documents are stored in Office 365, Microsoft knows about that and can turn on additional features. So for example, you have things like versioning. You have the ability to track versions over time, and if you need to roll back, you can. No more saving files multiple times because you want a certain version of it you want to go back to. That's all automatic. In fact, when you have things connected up to SharePoint in Word, it even automatically saves now. And it'll do that without you having to remember to do that. And we've all had that opportunity when we're working on a document, something breaks and we lose everything. That is completely gone now. Other features that it enables are collaboration with other users. So again, assuming the documents are stored in SharePoint, you can actually have multiple people working on the same documents, the same Word documents, PowerPoint, Excel documents, as you used before, but you actually have multiple people in real time working on the same document. You have check-in and check-out capabilities, and you have the ability to create shareable links that can be sent instead of, frankly, sending multiple copies of files everywhere. You can actually share a link that people can use now. The third major component is OneDrive for Business. And the nearest analogy for OneDrive for Business is Dropbox. And I'm sure that most of you have a service like this that you use for your personal documents. This is really meant for business documents. It functions very similarly in that there's a web interface for it, but you can also install a OneDrive application on your device or devices and take those files offline. And this is very handy for when you are working remotely, or maybe you're taking data or work on a vacation, unfortunately. You do not need an internet connection in order to work on these documents. Even though they are stored in the cloud, there's a version that gets downloaded locally. And what's great is when you go back to life and you get an internet connection again, it'll automatically resync these files back up. Works very similar to SharePoint. What's important about both SharePoint and OneDrive is the fact that all of the Office applications understand how to open and save files to both of these services natively. And that's key when you realize that, hey, if I want to be able to access my data from anywhere and any device, I need access to the same locations. You do not have to manage that process of, maybe dropping some files on a thumb drive and remember to plug it into your laptop when you get to where you're going. You get 1 terabyte of cloud storage per user. That's an insane amount of space. You really need to be adding a ton of pictures and videos and things like that to get to that level. But it's just another area where you don't have to worry about your file storage. You get plenty on a per user basis in OneDrive. The last major piece of Office 365 is Office itself. You can see that all of your well-known applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, OneNote, and Publisher, are all included in certain editions or versions of Office 365. And some people don't want to have the installed versions. Office 365, I believe with every package, comes with online versions of all of these applications. And I have to tell you that for many people, maybe not all people, certainly not all people, but a good portion of them, the online versions of these applications are just fine. They're not at feature parity with the ones that you're used to using on your desktop, but they are very, very good. They work very, very well. So you have a browser version. You can get installed versions of this. What's great about Office 365 is that you actually get 5 licenses for all of these applications that you can install on all of your devices. So that might be your work desktop, your laptop, your mobile phone, your iPad, and maybe your home computer are all included in outside of the Office 365 ecosystem. Those would all be individual licenses. Tremendous amount of value for the dollar, and again, it's Microsoft's intention to start to take these things and make it so that it really doesn't matter which device. This didn't used to be the case. They used to be very cagey. They didn't really want to interact with Apple, as an example. They've changed that, and they've realized, hey, we're in a cloud world, and we've got to work on every device. So the applications themselves, they are always updated. You're paying a subscription now for your Office, and what's great about that is that you always get the latest updates. And I can tell you, you're seeing your Office add new features and functionality on a pretty consistent basis, and you see these things turn on, and you think, wow, that was really cool. In sort of the old version where you had these things kind of on premise and not through a subscription service, it might be years before you saw any real improvements to the applications. And so that's another great benefit to having these programs through a subscription and always on. The last thing I want to say about this is that it's really the installed applications really bring everything together in terms of how Office 365 works. Again, you've got native apps on all of your devices, and they're constantly being updated, but they function better and they function differently when they're plugged into the Office 365 backbone. We'll give you a little bit of a demo on this in a second, but it's having the newest version of Office is great, but it's really about its connectivity and interaction with the rest of the platform that make these things awesome. So we talked a little bit about what Office 365 is. And to be honest, to really go through the entire platform would take way too long. Those 4 blocks, I think, are a good sort of low-hanging fruit description of what the platform is all about. But from Microsoft's perspective, those key components are really elements that they're trying to bring to the background. Office 365 and really the cloud era in general is really about taking infrastructure and servers and all of these concerns that we've all traditionally had and saying, you know, let's not focus on that stuff. Let's not make these things a first order concern, and let's really focus on what the end users are experiencing. All this stuff is really about the end users and the administrators and the managers of an organization, and the platform as they're putting it together is really kind of bringing those things to the forefront. And so Microsoft's messaging on this is around 3 key topics: worry less, work easier, and work together. And I don't know about you, but for me, I see this stuff and I think, wow, that's some great marketing language. That doesn't tell me anything. But inside of these messages is a lot of important information about the value of what you get from Office 365. So we're just going to cover them really briefly, and that'll help you understand a little bit more about what's so great about it. So worry less is really about security and sort of assurance. It's kind of the elephant in the room that when you take your data and you put it in the cloud, everybody's concerned about security. We see constant news headlines around the Targets and the Sonys and these massive data breaches, and they're legitimate concerns. So Microsoft has really taken this concern and brought it to the forefront and saying, yes, we get it. We understand that, hey, your data is no longer protected by your 4 walls, but let me help you understand how we can do things better once everything is in a single ecosystem. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that in a second. But what I've seen as an IT professional over the past 20 years is that these tools give you an unprecedented level of security and assurance about that security than I've ever seen in this entire time. And large enterprises have always had tools to help protect, but they're ridiculously complex and they're very expensive. Office 365 is giving you all of this functionality at a very, very low subscription price on a per user basis. Compliance concerns, data leaks, there is great tooling I'll show you that is just fantastic in terms of securing your data. So our next element here is work easier. And work easier is really, I think, at the core of the workspace concept. It's the how I work, it's the where I work, and it's the when I work. And when you pull your data out of your data center and you put it up in the cloud, now all you need is an internet connection and a device that's compatible. And that is really why Microsoft has spent so much time developing all of these native applications for these different devices, is because they understand that. It can't be that I have to access this via an installed application from one machine and you have to have a VPN up in order to connect. All that stuff goes away when you move everything to the cloud. Now all you need is an internet connection and really a browser. Even if you have a browser, you can get a very good experience with your data. And the final piece of the message is work together, and it's just really about collaboration. Collaboration in traditional terms was really about, writing a document. Maybe you turn track changes on, and then you email it, and then somebody gets this email with this document, and then they make some changes and edits, and then they forward it on to somebody else, who forward it on to somebody else, or maybe you send it to a distribution list, and there's 10 people with 10 copies of this thing, and everybody's trying to edit this stuff and then send it back to somebody who's going to organize. And the power of the cloud and the ability to share these documents in ways that you couldn't because everything was locked in a server is very impactful. We see it here at Verve when we're working on documents and we have multiple people working on an active document at the same time. We actually have folks who are located out of state in other cities, and we have the ability to collaborate with these people in a way that we literally never could with the traditional approach to documents and to data. So that's really the three core messages that Microsoft has about Office 365. And again, this is really a marketing message, but it does hold so much value in terms of helping to understand what they're trying to accomplish. And remember that Office 365 is a subscription. They understand that they have to continue to deliver value in order to continue to justify that sort of drip cost that we're now absorbing. And it's a different financial component. It's no longer one-time big capital expenses with servers and Windows operating systems and new versions of Exchange and things like that. It's really a monthly sort of approach, and that sometimes takes time to get used to. But Microsoft, on their side of it, is continually developing new features and upgrades that very much make it worthwhile. So that's Microsoft's messaging, and that's really what Office 365 is all about from a high level. I know we have some technical folks on the line, and we have folks in a management position. What I thought we would do is actually give you a bit of a demonstration of Office 365 itself. So what you're seeing here is the main page for Office 365. I can log into portal.office365.com, and I'm going to come to this web page. And you can see at the top here we have a bunch of applications. Okay, and so the first one I'm going to click on is PowerPoint. And you'll see here that we have PowerPoint Online. Now, clearly I've been giving you a demonstration through PowerPoint, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over my installed version of PowerPoint, and I wanted to just show you how this whole thing works together. So I'm going to go open on this side, and first of all what I want to do is I want to show you how SharePoint, which is this folder right here, and OneDrive are now sort of natively understood and recognized by PowerPoint. In older versions of Office and ones that don't have Office 365 integration, these didn't exist. But it's really these two pieces that are fundamental to understanding how the applications are supposed to work across devices. And so every device, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone, has access to this same set of information. These being my corporate shared data, and this one right here being my my own My Documents, which is really what OneDrive for Business is supposed to cover. And you can see here I've even added in my own personal OneDrive account, and I have access to that as well. So that's really how the document process would work for all of your applications. This works for Word and Excel. It works for anything that's document-centric. The second thing I wanted to show you is that we have a recently used list here. And you can see we've got a list of documents that I've been working with. And then you can see that we have another list over here. And if you look at it, it's actually a little bit different. All right. So first of all, we have this one, which is the one that we've been presenting today, Office 365 SMB. And you can see that's located over here. If you look at the next one and the next 4, they don't show up over here. But if you look deeper, the reason is because these documents were opened from my downloads folder, which is local, and it's not connected to Office 365, whether it's SharePoint or OneDrive. But if you go one more down, you'll see that we have this presentation I was talking about, the modern workforce. And you can see that they're the same over here as well. And that's because these are all located on SharePoint and OneDrive. And that's that synchronization, the fact that I can open up an application, maybe an installed application on one device, I can open it up through a browser on another, and everything's synchronized. Even my most recently used list is going to be included in that area. So that is essentially how the applications work and how the data works. And you'll find that across all of the applications that, like I said, are document-centric. If you look down here, we see another list of documents. This is across all of my applications. So you see we've got an Excel spreadsheet, we've got a OneNote, and we have more Excel spreadsheets. So I can come here and I can launch these, and they'll launch within the browser. And within the browser, I can opt optionally to open it up within an installed application. So I have choices when I try to access my documents. If I don't have a device with me and I just have somebody's browser, I can click on it and still work if I need to. You can see that I have pinned certain documents. If I happen to pin a document within any one of my applications, they're going to show up here. And then I've got a shared with me list of documents. So anybody else who sent me a link for data, or I'm sorry, for a document, will show up in this list and I can edit it. And you can see down here I've got a OneDrive and a SharePoint area. These are just sort of quick access to each of these services. I can get access to certain folders and certain SharePoint sites. Super, super easy to access my data no matter where I'm at. So the next area I'd like to show you is the admin area. I know that, like I said, we have some technical people on the line, and we have folks who are interested on the management side of things. So I'm going to click on admin, and just want to show you how easy it is to add a user. So I'm going to go here to users. I'm going to click on active users. We have a list of our internal users. I hit add, and this is pretty much it. I had a first name and a last name. I had a display name and a username. I can set a password, and then I can assign a license. Literally, as soon as I hit add, that user gets added. It takes maybe 2 minutes for everything to be set up, and they're ready to go. It's literally that easy. Groups, same exact process. I can create groups for organization. I can use groups for permissions. You'll see here that we have a few groups here that are related to applications that are non-Microsoft applications that use what's called single sign-on, or SSO. And if any of you have ever been to a website that gave you the option to log in with your Facebook account, this is really the exact same thing, but for business. You can use your Office 365 account to log in to many other applications. And what's great about that is that you don't have to manage separate accounts. Your users don't have to remember multiple passwords. And you have the ability to lock them out of those applications just by unchecking a checkbox for the groups that they're a part of. Very easy to set up, and I believe we're somewhere on 90% of our applications internally are integrated into Office 365, and so we have single sign-on for most of the things that we do, and it works really, really well. So the last place I want to show you, if we go back here to our home page, is the security and compliance. And I wanted to end with this console, again, to reiterate how much priority Microsoft gives to security and compliance. It's a first-order concern. There's a lot of work that goes in the background to make this thing possible. But for those of you who are managing an organization, or you have security responsibility or compliance responsibility, this sort of console is a godsend for your ability to manage the data. So first of all, we have just a very simple dashboard that we can look at for alerts. And anytime somebody tries to violate policy, let's say they try to send a document out that they shouldn't, maybe it contains financial information, social security numbers, or things like that, it will send an alert here. And you can create policies for allowing them to those alerts to be emailed to you if necessary. We're going to skip permissions. This is really just about assigning permissions for who can look at security information. But we're going to go to classifications and labels. And classifications are about giving users the ability to tag certain documents with information that Office 365 can use. And what's really great about this is that Office 365 can allow you to tag these things manually, or they can do it automatically. So for example, if you have a certain amount of data that must be retained for a certain period of time, you can tag that document with a label that will allow you to set a retention policy, and I'll show you that in a second. Another way of using labels is to tag documents as confidential or as sensitive. And by tagging these documents with these different categories and classifications, it gives you complete control over those documents. So in the traditional way of doing this, if I installed if I put a file that had critical financial information, or maybe it was a list of bank customers with account numbers and social security numbers, I would store that in a server, and that server would have a set of permissions on it, and which is great. It works really well until somebody takes that file, maybe they even had permission for that file, and they put it in email, and they remove it from that share, and they want to send it somewhere. And that's really the moment where those permissions really don't matter anymore, and you don't have any real control over that document. So what Office 365 does is say, hey, you got your files up in my system, and I control your email. I'm not going to let you send out a document that contains financial information. And that's essentially how it works. That is encompassed in this data loss prevention policy, and I can create this policy. I can do it based on labels, but you can see here that I have the ability to identify common types of sensitive information. For example, we have U.S. financial data here, and that protects credit card numbers, bank account numbers, ABA routing numbers. If you're in health, I can look at HIPAA information, and it's going to look for PII identifiers and medical terms. And you have the ability to select this and create policies for each one of these pieces. And so I can go through here and I can say, okay, this is my financial data policy. I want to protect everything in Office 365, including Exchange, OneDrive, and SharePoint. And then I'm going to set some settings. Okay, so if it contains this data and somebody is trying to send this data outside of the organization, then I want to do a few things. So first of all, I want to show a little policy tip. It's basically a little note that kind of pops up in Outlook and says, hey, this looks like it might be protected content. Do you know what you're doing? I can say, hey, only alert if there's 10 instances of let's say, an account number in there. But we can change that to 1. We can make it 100. It's up to you. I'm going to send out an incident report. And this is really the important part. I can restrict who can access the content. And right now, if I check this box, people outside your org can't get the content. And so what will happen is the end user, when they try to hit send in email, it will not let them if we have a policy set to prevent them. And that's really where, again, coming back to this idea around a platform and not just, or this being really the sum of the parts, it has the ability to give you these sort of protections and assurances for the data that's in your organization and allow you complete control over your documents. A few other areas just to look at. Data governance is really about making sure that that your data is being retained and archived properly. For those of you who have retention requirements, as I mentioned before, you can set policies that will allow you to define whether how long I keep certain kinds of data. So I can create my policy and I can say I want to retain it for 7 years. I can delete it, so I can have a destruction policy if I want to. I've got a lot of options in terms of what types of data I can protect. And again, this is done by policy so that you set it once and it'll automatically follow those orders. When you're looking at a compliance audit, this kind of control goes a long way to assuring the auditor that you are doing everything properly to protect your data. Threat management is really about anti-spam and anti-malware. You can control quarantine and how strict your policies are, all from this area. And then finally, search and investigation is really about things like e-discovery and legal compliance holds, where I've got to deal with a situation where I've got to make sure that the data is not being changed, and I can run searches that will discover or bring up data in emails or documents that match certain criteria. So kind of summing this part of it up, because all the data is inside of the platform, we have the ability to protect it. Office 365 knows about it, and it gives you tools that allow you to intentionally protect your data. So that's pretty much the end of the demonstration. I think what I'm hoping to get conveyed in this process is that it's not just SharePoint, it's not just OneDrive and Exchange, and it's not just the installed Office tools like Word and Excel. Microsoft is really creating a new workspace for you and your users, and it's trying to make all these sort of back-end technologies go away, really reduce the complexity and reduce the cost of having to set all this stuff up, and bring your users and your workspace to the forefront in order to make your life and your end user's life much, much more productive. So at this point, I'm going to hand this back over to Chad, and Chad's going to kind of wrap things up and give you some final information and talk a little bit about pricing.
Thanks, Jeff. Great overview. Really appreciate all the insights. We did have several questions come in while you were presenting. Most of them got answered, but there is one outstanding that you touched on really briefly. Talk about, just real briefly, we're almost out of time here, spam protection in Office 365. You said that it was there. Do I still need to pay my third-party spam protection provider? What does that look like?
No. In fact, the anti-spam protection comes with Office 365. It works really well. It basically identifies spam and it dumps them into your junk mail folder, which we all have always used, but it's really bringing the sort of enterprise-grade version of that and sends that to your junk mail, and it gives you policies that allow you to control how aggressive that is. It gives you a quarantine that you can release emails out of. It's a full-featured anti-spam product built in for free.
Perfect. So I don't need to spend that $3 or $4 a month per user on spam anymore, which is a huge savings.
Correct.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hopefully that answered any questions. Hopefully your questions that were asked during the event got answered. If not, please raise your hand and we'll go back and readdress those. But I'm going to assume that most of those got answered. It looked like they did. As we look at this product, it really breaks down into two product categories. There's the business professional product category, which is not quite as feature-rich as the enterprise product category, which you're looking at here. In the enterprise product category, you have 4 selections, which range from E1, E3, E5, and then Pro Plus. Each one has different advantages and different disadvantages. For most of our clients, we're seeing them in the E1 to E3 range, really depending upon how they want the delivery of Microsoft Office and how they want to handle some of the compliance features. The prices you see on the screen are Microsoft's pricing. We unfortunately don't have a whole lot of influence over those. So you can see that at the lowest level, you're going to be at about $8 per user per month paid annually. And at the highest, which includes a ton of things that most people don't need, you're at $35 per user per month. We've seen Microsoft fluctuate this pricing up and down slightly, but nothing significant over the years. And we anticipate that it'll stay about the same. So it gives you a sense of where you might be for your organization from a pricing perspective. Also, we did get one question just now about where do I start, where do we go from here if this is something you're interested in. An Office 365 migration is no trivial undertaking. and it is something that we need to enter into with kind of an assessment and understanding of where our clients are at, and then we can move forward from there with a quote, and then we move through the process. It's a process we can walk you through fairly straightforward, but it is time consuming and somewhat involved. So if that's something you're interested in, please reply to the follow-up emails that we're going to be sending thanking you for attending, or I'm pretty sure we're going to be reaching out with phone calls to everybody that attended as well, just to answer any additional questions or maybe schedule a one-on-one technical call. With that, it doesn't look like there's any further questions. We're going to cut this off now, but I want to thank everybody for attending. Again, my name is Chad Sublett, Vice President of Sales here at Verve Networks. Our primary presenter today was Jeff Gilbert, CEO at Verve Networks, and just want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you so much, and have a great day.